These aren't the stories your mother told you. No, these are the other stories.
Today's episode of The Other Stories is Another Predictable Long Con, written by Richard Reynolds and narrated by Manny, Realguy.
A good grifter needs to have a character or be a character. Swifty was all character and a hell of a grifter for it. Unfortunately, he wasn't much of a long-form planner and impatient as a toddler, so it was all short scams for him, quick money. Swifty's given name was Terry Box, which he hated, so self-applied Swifty until it finally caught on. He'd gotten into the confidence game because growing up he'd thought conman movies were the coolest. Naturally he'd ached to be part of a long con because, well, all those movies revolved around long cons. His partner of the last 4 months, Chris Post, a document counterfeiter, was well on his way to becoming world class when Swifty had approached him for some IDs. They'd really hit it off, in no small part due to their shared hatred of surnames that sounded like boring objects. Chris, initially, had been the cautious counterpoint to Swifty, taking low-risk jobs from people he knew to stay below the radar, but remained in demand nonetheless. Lately, though, Swifty had been dreaming up schemes requiring fast document turnover, and had even roped Chris into being the straight man on 2 Shakin' Stevens and a slippery Mavis, which Chris had quietly thrilled in. As a team, they were broadening each other's repertoires. They were perfecting a scam Swifty had eloquently named the Shitty Shovel when Mika Holt entered their lives. Just like fucking Batman too. 1 second she wasn't there, the next she was. It was pretty rad. Chris Post, I represent Red Fox, she said by way of introduction. No way, blurted Swifty, instantly excited. The autistic mastermind? He's real? Asked Chris, doubtfully. Too right, said Swifty, but I heard he's deaf, and he'd retired. Retiring, said Mika. Evidently too many people know him by reputation, so he's pulling one last job. Classic, shouted Swifty. This is the bit where you're recruiting the team then? And you want us? Just Mr. Post. We need a forger, and we need the best. The rest of the team is filled. Swifty was crestfallen. I'm sorry, this is pretty far-fetched, said Chris, dubious. Besides, I only work with known quantities. More risk, more reward, said Mika. Come to a meeting tomorrow. Hear the score, meet the team. I guarantee you'll want in. Chris looked at Swifty. You've got to do it, he said, through disappointment. Red Fox's last score. You'll be a legend, and you just know it's going to be a long con. Chris smiled. I'll come, but only if Swifty can. Swifty looked at Mika hopefully. He is a capable operator. I suppose tasks can be shared. Fine. And with that she was away, leaving the details of the meeting in her wake. As you might imagine, it took place in an abandoned warehouse. Swifty and Chris sat with 3 men while Mika murmured to another older chap sat off to one side. That's Red Fox, said Swifty. He doesn't look deaf, said Chris. No, maybe you're right and he's autistic, said Swifty, but was cut off by Mika. Gentlemen, I speak for Red Fox. If you have questions, please direct them to me. He does not like to be addressed. Now, for those unaware of the publicised financial issues of movie star Klaus Booth, he recently purchased 3 stately homes while on a bender, which he is now legally obligated to pay for the refurbishment. To cover the costs, he is auctioning off the cream of his comic book collection: Action Comics No. 1, Detective Comics No. 27, Batman No. 1, Marvel Comics No. 1, Superman No. 1, Captain America No. 1, Wiz Comics No. 2, Showcase No. 4, and Amazing Fantasy No. 15, all grade 8 or higher. We aim to replace the collection with counterfeits as they are transported to auction. They are expected to sell for 30 million, but we have a buyer lined up to take the lot for 25. with the proviso that the counterfeits are later revealed so his purchase can be correctly valued. You all will receive 10% of the sale. "It's a fucking heist," whispered Swifty excitedly. "Yeah, but we've never done this scale of work," whispered Chris. 2.5 mil, dude. You'll do fine. A heist. Insane. The next bit is where she'll introduce the team and lay out the plan. I bet there's blueprints and shit. Mika's glare silenced them, but Swifty wasn't wrong. The team comprised of Roy Johnson, comics historian and publisher of the trade magazine Long Underwear Characters, Johnny Rubber, cat burglar, Jensen Clark, hacker tech, Chris, forger, Swifty, inside man, Mika, fixer and acquisitions, Red Fox, mastermind. The plan? Everything hinges on the fact that Booth's collection is CGC graded, Mika started. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Pretend we aren't all fucking nerds like this fucking nerd, Swifty cut in, pointing at Roy. What's CGC? Mr. Johnson is an indispensable member of this team, Mika replied, sternly. You will show due respect, or I will have you killed. Seriously? Asked Swifty, to no reply. Okay. Sorry, Mr. Johnson. The Certified Guarantee Company are the authority on grading the condition of comic books. Once assessed, the comic is sealed in a plastic case known as a slab, along with hologrammed labelling of the grading details. If it is removed from the slab, its value is reduced. Booth's collection being CGC graded means Mr. Post need only reproduce the visible exterior of each comic, explained Roy. This was a relief to Chris, who doubted his ability to reproduce whole comic books. Now, if we're all on the same page, and with Red Fox's permission, we'll move on to your individual responsibilities, said Mika. In true montage fashion, it was laid out like so. Chris and Roy would work closely to produce perfect forgeries, but for a nigh unnoticeable flaw. Months after the auction, by way of interviews with the winning bidders for his magazine, Roy would discover the flaws and out the collection as forgeries. Equipped with a false identity, Swifty was to gain a position at Allied Security, the firm hired to transport the Booth collection to Antiquity Auction House, then ensure he'd get a place on the Booth collection team, relaying all information pertaining to the operation. Jensen was to gain total access to Antiquity Auction House's power and security systems. Johnny was to steal an allotment of slabs and labels from the CGC facility, which would go unnoticed due to Jensen altering the inventory data. Johnny would also infiltrate Antiquity the day before the heist to pull the switch. Mika would acquire any requested equipment and keep everyone up to date. Red Fox would be tweaking the finer points of the plan as the information came in and as the long angles were worked out. Of course, you know there'll be something else going on, Swifty explained to Chris after the meeting. Besides a remarkably complex plan? Asked Chris. Yeah, stuff we're not privy to. Plans within plans, said Swifty. Like, there'll be a bit where everything seems like it's going wrong, but actually it's part of the plan, but things could actually go tits up too. So, what? Said Chris. Just don't come off like a fucking amateur, dude. Whatever happens, be cool. Oh, and assume at the end something else entirely has been going on. Like what? Asked Chris. I don't know, like Mika has been Red Fox all along, or Klaus Booth is in on it and it's an insurance job. Just keep your eyes open, you can learn a lot. And so everyone got to work. Swifty got the job at Allied Security without a hitch, quickly becoming a beloved member of staff. While doing the heist team proud, Swifty was disgruntled that his first long con was, essentially, holding down a day job. Still, he kept to character, conversationally hinting at what a huge Klaus Booth fan and comic reader he was, so when the Booth comic collection was assembled, Swifty was a shoo-in. From there, things became pleasingly shady, as he leaked logistical details of the operation. Chris, guided by the expert eye of Roy, found recreating the imagery of the covers was less of a problem than replicating the paper and print quality. A trial and error process with various presses and papers got him there by increments, from initial efforts that were smudged and off-colour to, eventually, brilliant replicas that passed Roy's standard. Red Fox requested at least 5 premium replicas of each comic, so that the very best might be used in the switch. Johnny Rubber, an old hat, had no trouble snatching the slabs and labels. For the challenge he took 100 of each, because why not have redundancy? Jensen hacked antiquity auction houses' systems early, orchestrating random glitches and power outages, which in-house security were unable to remedy, laying the groundwork that would alleviate suspicion of system errors on the day of the heist. The day before the heist, Jensen surreptitiously disabled the motion sensors in the duct system and looped in previous security footage feeds so Johnny could gain access to the building undetected, unscrewing various vent panels before settling into the ducts with the twice-deep shoebox-sized lockbox containing the fake collection. Thus came the heist. Swifty's allied security team would transport the collection the evening before the auction. Antiquity's in-house security were to accompany them to a secure room, where the collection would change hands and be inspected by Antiquity's expert, then be placed in a safe, but a blackout along the route would allow Johnny to dangle the fake collection from a vent to be switched by Swifty. Johnny would then use the ducts to get to the visitors' reception area, where awaiting Mika would use a second blackout to take possession of the lockbox, spiriting it away in a shopping bag. Chris and Jensen, stationed in a nearby flat, had their eyes on all the security feeds and were keeping everyone updated via radio comms. Swifty would be incommunicado once at work, so took the opportunity to call Chris before his shift. "We're doing a fucking heist!" he shouted. "I know, calm down," said Chris. "You've got this." "Shit, yeah, I do. Remember, keep your eyes open, you've got to have my back." "On it," said Chris. "Be careful." And he had been, slickly giving himself charge of the lockbox without the rest of the allied team objecting. Chris watched as, simultaneously, Swifty's team accessed Antiquity to be checked and accompanied by in-house security. Mika entered the visitors' reception and busied herself looking at the displays, and Johnny dislodged a vent cover a corridor away from the secure room. It was like clockwork. Jensen cut power as Swifty passed the prepped vent. When the lights came back on, within seconds, Chris almost laughed to see Swifty pantomime confusion and outrage as he mouthed off at the lacking professionalism of the in-house security. The switch had gone entirely unnoticed. With in-house security on the back foot, the handover at the security room was brisk and chilly. Swifty's team were being escorted away when the second blackout allowed Mika to receive the collection via the vent in reception. "This is goddamn textbook," Chris had been thinking to himself at the very moment that it all went to shit. An alarm sounded as security called for the allied team to be rounded up and the building locked down. The video feeds were pandemonium as security teams scuffled and the staff scrambled to secure each wing. "Mika, Johnny, get out of there," Jensen called via comms. "What happened?" asked Chris. "Something in the security room," said Jensen. Chris zoomed into the panicked expert. The comic he handled was one of his early efforts, a clear fake. The wronged comics had been switched. Was this it? The part of the plan they weren't privy to? "Talk to me," Johnny hissed, down comms. "It's blown. Just get out." "Mika, was this planned?" Chris called, but she didn't reply. "Mika, Swifty's still in there. Please." He scanned the feeds but couldn't see her. The allied team were being escorted to the secure room, but he couldn't see Swifty amongst them. He couldn't see him anywhere. Of course he couldn't. You could argue Swifty was never there at all, because as we established at the beginning, Swifty was a character, specifically the character Red Fox played to recruit Chris and be his own inside man. And Red Fox went full method. The real Red Fox. Not the deaf actor hired to play him in meetings. It hadn't all been a scam. It really was his last job. He just didn't want to share the take with 3 crooks and a comic nerd. It was for him and his wife, Mika, to disappear into the night with. He didn't have a buyer for the collection. He had 5. Why sell the originals when you can sell 5 sets of counterfeits instead? Why make 25 mil when you could make 125? As far as grifts go, this wasn't the most original to end his career on, so he figured, fuck it, Why not fold in every trope in the book? Should be good for a laugh.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode of The Other Stories. Another predictable long con was written by Richard Reynolds, narrated by Manny, Realguy, produced by Duncan Muggleton with music by Duncan Muggleton and Tom Robson, and sound effects provided by freesound.org. The episode illustration was provided by Luke Spooner of Carry On House. A quick thanks to our community managers Jasmine Arch, Joshua Boucher, and his eyeless ones, Mary Pastrano and Cody Czarzasty, and to Joshua Boucher for helping with our submission reading. And of course to Ben Errington, his fame, a kaleidoscope of neon dreams, shimmering in the binary twilight. Richard Reynolds is the owner and operator of Ground Zero Comics, a small comic shop in Mansfield, England. He writes and creates his own comics whenever he finds the time. You can read some of his work via the free comics sidebar at groundzerocomics.co.uk. Manny Realguy was forged in the centre of a supernova 10,000 years from now. He rides the cosmic waves and feasts on dying planets, shitting out stars. The Other Stories is a production of the Story Studio Hawk and Cleaver and is brought to you with a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives license. That means don't change it, don't sell it, but by all means share the hell out of it. So, until next time.